They don't tell you what's right. They don't tell you, and you don't live for the highs. You live for a constant high. I mean, you don't live for the highs when you know there's going to be a big bust at the end. So being selfish, being self-interested, doesn't mean that if there's a line of cocaine here, I'm going to take it because you know what? I'm going to feel better afterwards. Why not? Because I also realize, because I can think, that there's a negative consequences. And in this case, I believe at least, that the negative consequence is greater than the high. So I don't do it. And you can apply this to the kind of food you eat, right? Sometimes emotionally, we'd love to have that huge, super great chocolate full of sugar and carb piece of cake, right? And we understand when it comes to food that we sometimes have to avoid that and suppress, not follow our emotions, but use our head. Well, again, that same principle needs to apply in everything in life. You might be attracted to an incredible woman who is going to incredibly destroy you. And if you sat down for a minute and thought about it, you'd realize it, but she's hot. But weigh the benefit of one night of hot sex versus she's going to demolish you, right? I wouldn't know what that feels like, but I've seen the movie, right? It's just not worth it. It's like the chocolate cake. It's not worth it. But you need to be able to use this consistently in your life in order to be able to make those kind of judgments and be able to be strong enough. And this takes strength because we're not taught this. We're not taught to stop and think. Particularly with modern education, we're taught to emote. We're taught to follow our feelings. We're very touchy-feeling these days. But that's not right. It's not what's going to lead you to the right decisions. We're taught to listen to everybody's advice. Well, most people don't know what's good for you. You know who knows what's good for you? You do. If you spend the time to think about it. Okay, so my pitch today is thinking. Right? It's thinking, thinking, thinking. Underlies everything. Everything in life, and underlies the whole foundation of self-improvement. Every aspect of it, everything you hear up here over the weekend needs to be evaluated based on that. Right? Does this make sense? Is this the way I want to live my life? Is this going to lead me to a better life? And that's their burden, to show you rationally, through reason, that it is, that it's going to. I hope I haven't spoiled the weekend. So, I'm kidding. So that's self-interest. So emotions, good things, but they're not tools for making decisions. Where do emotions come from? Why do we have the emotions that we have?
Keep us alive.
They keep us alive. In what sense they keep us alive?
On making decisions for your survival.
Yeah, but should we? I just made a whole case for not making decisions in your survival based on emotions. Because where do emotions come from? Are they just random chemical whatever in the body?
They come from the mammal brain. They come from the brain that was there before this brain developed.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think that factors. Have ever you had a change in emotion? Because change leads one to understand what happens. Because have you ever had an emotion about something and then it's changed? I don't know, you loved a woman and then you stopped loving her?
It comes from your thoughts.
Yeah, it comes from your, but it's not even thoughts, it's conclusions. It comes from conclusions that you've come to. It's an automatic response to subconscious conclusions that you've made already. So it's all subconscious, but it's the conclusions. And when the conclusions change, what happens to emotions? They change instantly? No, it takes a while, but they do change. So for example, if you're in love with a woman and you discover that she's cheating on you, right? Do you immediately not love her? I wish it was that easy, right? But it's not. It usually takes some time. Because what happens is our minds are these integrating machines. They like to connect stuff, and it takes a time for the subconscious to catch up with your consciousness. So your emotions over time will change, and they will change if you come to a conclusion. But it takes time. So emotions are responses to conclusions that we've come to in the past. Now, sometimes we've come to conclusions in our childhood about things that we weren't even aware we were making conclusions about. And that leads us to have emotional responses today that we might not even understand because they're based on conclusions that we came to a long time ago. And the only way to undo those emotions, go see a good psychotherapist if one existed, is ultimately to change those conclusions, identify what they were and change them. But emotions are just conclusions. Those conclusions might be wrong. We might have had a nasty, mean mother and we came to a conclusion about women because of that when we were 3 or 4 years old, without even really being fully conscious and being fully rational. That might just be wrong. And today we have certain emotional responses that just don't match to how we'd like to have. And this is why emotions are not tools of making decisions, because we don't know where exactly they come from. I think the more we introspect, the more we think about ourselves, the more we study ourselves, the more we know about our emotions, the more we can fix the bad conclusions and therefore change our emotional responses. But that's hard work. And you're never quite sure you're there. And that's why emotions are not the way in which we make decisions. The only time you want to make a decision based on emotion is in a true emergency, right? When you just don't have time to think. And then emotion's as good as anything else. And hopefully your emotions are tuned with your conclusions and you're making the right decision. But that's rarity. How many of us really live in situations while survival depends on making instantaneous decisions? Almost none of us. Almost every decision we make, we can afford to stop and think about it. And I highly recommend doing that. Most of us get into trouble when we don't do that. Okay? So emotions come from thoughts. They come from conclusions, but we don't always know if those conclusions were right. We don't always know if those thoughts were rational, and therefore we can't always trust our emotions. And that's why we always need to step back and think them through. Maybe they're fine. Maybe that emotion is absolutely right. Maybe it's not. We have to be open to that. So again, the mechanism is reason. Okay? And as a consequence, this is one of the reasons, lying doesn't work. Because if our means of survival, if the way in which we create stuff is through reason, reason means what? Reason means absorbing information and analyzing it and being what about that information? Being honest about it. We want real facts. You know the computer terminology of garbage in, garbage out? You feed something to a computer that's BS, then you're going to get BS. You're not going to get good stuff out of feeding. You have a computer up here. It's kind of a computer. It's more than a computer, right? If you feed it garbage, it's going to spew out garbage. If you feed it lies, you're going to fail. And you think that you can hold the lies separate from the truth? Good luck. Because as I said, our minds are integrating machines. They love to integrate stuff. Our mind, our subconscious doesn't know what you've defined as a lie and what isn't. It's going to mesh them up. Most people who lie constantly can't tell the difference. Now, I'm pretty old, particularly in this room, right? And I have a hard time remembering what actually happens. Right, like a week ago, you asked me, what did you do a week ago? I have to really think about it. I don't remember. I really don't. Now, what happens when you lie? You have to remember what you did, and then what else do you have to remember? What you told, the lie. And the lie comes with all kinds of complicated circumstances, right? Because you have to remember